All right, good morning, class, and Dr. Matas. Today I'll be going over chapters 4 and 5 in the Scaffolding Language and Scaffolding Learning book by Pauline Gibbons. I'm going to start off with chapter 4, and Gibbons talks about the speaking and writing cycle. She talks about the first stage, which is doing an experiment in small groups. This is an opportunity for students to explore and develop certain scientific understandings. There's no academic language required. So students are in an environment where they feel comfortable using the language that they use most often to build a good foundational understanding of the experiment. Students then attempt to explain what they saw. Now, whether that be to the teacher or to their other classmates, they're not only simply doing now, they're doing and thinking. So as they're doing the experiment, they begin to dialogue with either the teacher or the fellow classmates on what's actually happening and why is it happening. So there's this opportunity to do and then to think. The next is stage 2, which is introducing key vocabulary. So this is when the teacher begins to introduce academic language into the experiment. Students are given an opportunity to develop some understandings about magnets before they were expected to understand and use more scientific discourse and vocabulary. And then they're going from words such as stick to words like attract and repel. So kind of during this stage, us teachers are slowly introducing this academic language. Not saying they have to use it, but we're just beginning to get them to introduce it, to kind of say, oh, this word means this and this word means that. So we're slowly introducing this to the kids as they're doing their experiment. Stage 3 is the teacher guided reporting. This helps students make sense of learning activities through talking with them, and in this process introduce new language. This is kind of the idea of leading from behind. As the students present on their experiment, as they talk about it, the teacher will model alternative forms of language that are more appropriate in the context of talking about science. This idea of talking like a scientist. So the students are presenting on this. You begin to maybe chime in and say, well, maybe this word may be what a scientist will use. Try to use this word as you present to me or as you present to your small group. So we're slowly as well introducing these words, but we're leading from behind. We're supporting them, we're making them feel comfortable, and we're giving them alternative academic language to use as they present. And the last, stage 4, is journal writing. This question that they have to answer within their journals is, what have you learned? And students begin to write, and it's an opportunity for them to formulate their own talk. Teacher-guided reporting sessions influences the way the student writes in their journal. So what Gibbons talks about is that teachers begin to see that students are using the academic language that the student learned through their teacher-guided reporting, and not using the language they first used in the experiment in stage 1. And so as students are able to learn about these new academic language and words, they begin to use them in their writing, which essentially is our end goal as educators. And what are the implications for the classroom? Language that would normally would be beyond EL students' comprehension is more likely to be understood when students can bring their experience and understandings as a basis of interpretation. So basically, if we can build a strong foundation of understanding for our EL students in any subject, in any subject at all, it allows them an opportunity to succeed when they have to begin now to not only talk about it, but have to write about it. So if they understand what they're writing about, if they understand what they're talking about, we're opening up opportunities for success when they begin to write and speak on it. So chapter 5, learning to write in a second language and culture. So Gibbons kind of talks about what are effective writers and what are poor writers. Effective writers are more likely to think about and plan their writing. They understand writing is a recursive process, continually revising and editing at all stages of their writing from first draft to final product. And they're aware of the linguistic differences between writing and speaking. Poor writers are more likely to focus on mechanics of writing, such as spelling, less able to anticipate the language and content of information as a reader, will require to fully understand their writing. Writer tends to sound like speech written down, and they typically have difficulty revising and editing their work. Gibbons also talks about genres. Genres are cultural and shared by members of their culture. They have a specific purpose, such as, is it for amusement? Is it to teach students? Is it to persuade someone to think a certain way? So what is that specific purpose? Genres have a particular overall structure. Gibbons gives an example of the Australian news program that begins off with their top news or their most recent news, and then slowly works down to their sports and their weather. So it has an overall structure. And then genres have a specific language features. And so Gibbons also gives an example of newspapers, how newspapers use more past tense language. And so every genre is either has a specific purpose, a particular overall structure, and a specific language feature. So learning a second language thus means learning the different kinds of spoken and written genres need to participate in the second language culture. Okay, so the teaching and learning cycle Gibbons talks about is stage 1, building knowledge of the field. So this means creating a mind map, maybe a wallpaper activity where the students work in small groups to create a poster to put on the wall. That could be shared reading, watching a video, or even barrier games. So this stage is just building an overall foundation of understanding of what they're going to be writing about. Stage 2 is modeling and deconstructing the genre. So we as teachers present a text that is similar to the one that students will eventually write themselves. So we're giving them a visual representation of what we want, not only structurally, but even content-wise. So this is just giving the students a visual of what you're looking for as a teacher. Stage 3 is joint construction. Give students suggestions and contribute ideas while the teacher writes, and together the teacher and students discuss how the writing can be improved and whether the information is accurate. So this is more of this kind of chew phase where the students kind of are able to digest the information. They're looking, they're talking about it, we're dialoguing, collaborating it, they're seeing the visual representations on the board. So this is more of just kind of processing the information that you're going to be writing about. And last but not least is stage 4, independent writing. This is an opportunity for students to write their own text now. Of course, we're providing scaffolds, whether that be everything you wrote on the board stays on the board that they can kind of look at. You remind them about the process of writing first draft, then self-editing, discussing the draft with friends, and later with the teacher. So we're kind of reinforcing the idea of the process that they have to go through as they write their paper, and then finally producing a published draft. And at the end here, I just want to talk about one thing that Gibbons talks about as one tip is that teachers can make copies of students' texts and use as a useful model and resource for other future classes. So if there's papers that we really like, that we really want our future students to kind of replicate, we can copy those papers, laminate them, and then use them as a model for next year or and for future classes, so students have an idea of what essentially we're looking for as teachers when we're in the writing process. So thank you guys for listening. Hope you have a great day. See you next class.